You see, after years of walking this earth, observing human nature in all its brilliance and all its blind spots, I've come to a sobering realization. Intelligence isn't about how many books you've read or how fast you can calculate. It's about how you live, how you treat others, how you respond when life exposes your ignorance or challenges your pride. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. There are certain patterns, 6 to be precise, that don't just hint at a lack of wisdom. They scream it, not in loud, obvious ways, but in the subtle behaviors that sabotage growth, corrode relationships, and imprison the mind. Now, before you scoff or start thinking of someone else, pause. Because this video isn't about judging others. It's about turning the lens inward, recognizing the traps that even the smartest among us can fall into, and more importantly, finding the courage to rise above them. Each of these 6 signs is a mirror reflecting back to us the parts we often ignore. And in the spirit of Stoic philosophy, this isn't a list to shame anyone. It's a guide, a compass pointing us away from folly and toward a life of deeper awareness, better choices, and inner strength. So if you're ready to challenge yourself, to think, to evolve, then let's begin this journey together. Because the road to wisdom, it always begins with the willingness to look at where we are and where we refuse to grow. 1. Constant blaming, masters of excuses, prisoners of growth. The second clear sign of a foolish person is this: they are always blaming someone else. No matter the situation, it's never their fault. A failed project? The market was too tough. A missed promotion? The boss was biased. They have an excuse ready for everything, but never a moment of reflection. Blaming is their shield, a convenient way to protect themselves from discomfort, from criticism, from truth. But what they don't realize is this: that same shield becomes a prison. It keeps them stuck in the same patterns over and over again, unable to grow, unable to evolve. Let me share a story. There was a woman named Lisa, an event organizer I worked with in the past. She was put in charge of planning a major conference. It was a big opportunity, but it ended in failure. Attendance was low, engagement was poor, sponsors were disappointed. Lisa's reaction? She immediately pointed fingers. She blamed the marketing team. They didn't promote the event properly, she insisted. But when the details were reviewed, the truth came out. Lisa had failed to send the event details on time, which caused a delay in the entire marketing campaign. The failure wasn't because of others. It started with her. And even then, even with all the facts on the table, she refused to take responsibility. She kept blaming. She kept defending herself. And in the process, she lost something far more valuable than a successful event. She lost the trust of her colleagues. Eventually, Lisa stepped down, not because of one mistake, but because of her refusal to own it. The Stoics teach us that taking responsibility is the gateway to growth. It's not about loving criticism, it's about loving truth, because only in truth can we learn, evolve, and become better versions of ourselves. So the next time you catch yourself blaming someone else, pause. Ask yourself, have I truly done everything I could? Is there something I could have done differently? Because blaming won't change the past, but taking responsibility, that will change you. Wise people are not perfect, but they are honest. They fall, but they get back up with clarity. They don't hide behind excuses. They face their failures and use them as fuel for improvement. So choose the harder path, not the path of blame, but the path of ownership, integrity, and real transformation. 2. Arrogance over humility. When ego drowns, wisdom. The third unmistakable sign of a foolish person is this: arrogance. Not the kind that quietly believes in its own worth, but the loud, performative kind. The type of person who tries to prove they're the smartest in the room every time. Arrogance is more than just unpleasant. It's a mask for insecurity, and worse, it's a major barrier to growth and learning. Because when someone thinks they already know everything, they stop listening. And when they stop listening, they stop improving. Take Michael, for example, a manager at a large corporation. In every meeting, he talked over people. He dismissed ideas that weren't his. He even mocked colleagues in front of others, all in the name of proving his so-called brilliance. Then came the big failure. A major project under Michael's direction collapsed. Instead of reflecting on what went wrong, he blamed his team, accusing them of not understanding his vision. But the truth was clear. It wasn't their lack of understanding that caused the failure. It was his arrogance, his refusal to listen, his belief that his way was the only way. When his boss asked him to explain what happened, Michael couldn't give a real answer. He had been so wrapped up in his ego that he never even considered the possibility that he might have been part of the problem. You see, humility doesn't mean thinking less of yourself. It means being open to the fact that others might have something to teach you. It means valuing collaboration over domination. It means caring more about what's right than about being right. Stoic philosophy reminds us that wisdom comes only when we are willing to admit we don't know everything, when we are brave enough to say, "I was wrong," and wise enough to ask, "What can I learn from this?" So if you ever find yourself falling into the trap of needing to be the smartest, pause and ask, am I seeking truth or just recognition? Am I helping others grow or shutting them down? Because true intelligence doesn't make others feel small, it lifts them up. It empowers, it listens, it learns. And if you want to walk the path of wisdom, let go of arrogance. Let humility lead the way. 3. A closed mind, the fortress of ignorance. The first undeniable sign of a foolish person is this: a closed mind. A closed mind is like a fortress, built brick by brick, from fear, pride, and stubbornness. It's a rigid space where no new ideas are allowed to enter, and no growth is permitted to happen. People like this live in boxes of their own making. They insist that everything must be done according to their familiar rules, and anything different is automatically labeled a threat. But here's the twist. Their outward confidence? It's often just a mask. Because true confidence doesn't need to block out new perspectives, it welcomes them. The wise admit they don't know everything. The foolish pretend they already do. Let me give you a real example. There was a man named Mark, a department manager at a company I once worked for. Mark believed without question that the old ways of doing things were the best. Even though his team was clearly falling behind competitors, he refused to adapt. When a younger employee suggested using modern project management software, Mark shut the idea down immediately. "We've done it this way for 10 years. It's worked fine," he said. But in reality, it wasn't working. Other teams were improving and evolving. Mark's team, meanwhile, continued to struggle, not because of laziness or bad luck, but because they were operating with outdated methods. Instead of reflecting, Mark blamed his staff. He blamed the market. He even blamed luck. But he never once stopped to question his own entrenched mindset. That's what a closed mind does. It doesn't just resist new knowledge, it damages everyone around it. The sixth step shows everyone how to protect their own knowledge. It prevents growth. It spreads stagnation. It turns leadership into dictatorship. But Stoic philosophy offers a different path. It teaches that wisdom isn't about always being right. It's about being willing to grow, even when that means admitting, "I was wrong." So if you find yourself rejecting change, clinging to the past, or refusing to consider a different point of view, stop and reflect. Ask yourself, am I holding on to this idea because it's truly the best way? Or am I simply afraid to change? Because the moment you let go of stubbornness, the moment you say, "I want to learn," that's when real wisdom begins to take root. 4. Talking more than listening, the sound of shallow thinking. The final sign of a foolish person isn't always about what they say, but how often they speak. They dominate every conversation. They interrupt. They offer their opinions before they've even heard the question. To them, silence is awkward. Listening is a waste of time. But here's the truth. The more a person needs to talk, the less they tend to know. Foolish people don't seek understanding, they seek attention. They're not trying to connect, they're trying to win. And in doing so, they reveal a shallow mind, one that's far more interested in being heard than in actually learning. Let me share a story, one that might feel familiar to many. John was a father I once knew well, meaning, hard-working, but tragically unaware. Every night at the dinner table, his children would sit down, eager to share the stories of their day. But John never noticed. As soon as someone spoke, he'd cut in. He'd launch into his own stories, relive his own glory days, and give unsolicited lectures about how things used to be. His kids stopped trying. His wife, thoughtful, intelligent, would bring up ideas about budgeting or improving the family's routine, only to be dismissed. "We'll do it my way. I've been doing this longer than you." What John didn't realize was this. By refusing to listen, he was slowly silencing the people who loved him most. They didn't argue. They didn't push back. They simply shut down emotionally and spiritually because they felt unheard, unseen, and unvalued. And that's what happens when we speak more than we listen. We don't just fill the air with noise. We drain the room of connection. We create distance where there should be understanding. The Stoics saw listening not as a passive act, but as a discipline of the highest form. Epictetus reminded us, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we may listen twice as much as we speak." Listening is not weakness. It is power, the quiet, steady power of someone who seeks to understand before they respond. It requires humility. It requires patience. And above all, it requires a genuine desire to connect rather than control. Ask yourself, do I truly listen, or do I just wait for my turn to speak? Do I interrupt to insert my view, or do I pause to consider someone else's perspective? When someone shares their thoughts, do they leave feeling understood or overruled? Because the wise do not rush to speak. They know that words, once spoken, can't be taken back. That silence isn't emptiness, it's space for meaning to unfold. They understand that the deepest truths are often found not in the noise, but in the quiet between sentences. So if you recognize this in yourself, the urge to always lead the conversation, to always be the loudest voice in the room, take it as a signal, not of dominance, but of disconnection. Try this instead. Next time your child speaks, listen fully, without judgment. Next time your partner offers a suggestion, pause, don't react, reflect. And when someone disagrees with you, don't defend, inquire. Because every time you choose to listen, you're not just honoring them, you're cultivating something far greater within yourself. Wisdom born of stillness. 5. Lack of empathy, the blindness of the heart. There is a kind of ignorance that doesn't show up on IQ tests. It doesn't wear the mask of loud opinions or flawed logic. No, this kind of ignorance runs deeper. It shows itself in how we treat those around us when their pain doesn't affect us directly. It's the ignorance of lacking empathy. You see, empathy is not about being soft. It's not weakness, nor is it merely politeness. Empathy is wisdom that touches the soul. It's the ability to pause, to step out of our own narrative and imagine what someone else might be carrying. Foolish people lack this depth. They operate like islands, self-contained, disconnected, and unaware of how their words and actions ripple outward. They move through life assuming that everyone else should think, act, and feel exactly like them, and when others don't, they judge, criticize, or worse, ignore. Let me tell you about Paul. Paul was a team leader in a marketing department, sharp, efficient, and blunt to a fault. He prided himself on results, deadlines, performance, and whenever someone fell short, his reaction was swift and public. One day, a co-worker named Susan missed a critical deadline. Paul didn't ask why. He didn't pull her aside or check in. He called her out in front of the entire team. Cold, direct, unacceptable. This team doesn't tolerate excuses, he said. What he didn't know, or worse, didn't care to ask, was that Susan's son had been hospitalized that week. She was up all night at the emergency room. She had been juggling grief, fear, and responsibility, with barely any sleep. A year later, the wheel turned. Paul's own mother fell critically ill. Suddenly he found himself in that same exhausted, helpless place. And only then did he truly understand what empathy meant. He realized what his words had cost, the trust of his team, the dignity of others, and the part of himself that once claimed to lead with integrity. The Stoics never taught that we must be emotionally reactive, but they did teach that we must be human. Seneca wrote, "Wherever there is a human being, there is an opportunity for kindness." Empathy is not about indulgence, it is about perspective. It is about recognizing that each person you meet is fighting a battle you may not see. And that battle is not an excuse, but it is an invitation to respond with grace instead of judgment. A foolish person believes others exist only to serve their goals. A wise person sees others as fellow travelers, flawed, striving, suffering just like themselves. Ask yourself, do I listen or do I dismiss? Do I rush to conclusions or do I ask what's really going on beneath the surface? Am I so focused on outcomes that I forget the human beings behind them? Because without empathy, leadership becomes tyranny, relationships become transactional, and life itself becomes cold and mechanical. But when you choose empathy, when you choose to see, you gain more than understanding. You gain connection, you gain trust, and you gain the kind of wisdom that can't be taught in books, only lived through experience. So next time someone disappoints you, don't react first. Pause, ask, listen. Because in that small moment of empathy, you might just be practicing the deepest form of intelligence. 6. Fear of change, the comfort zone that becomes a cage. There's a subtle kind of foolishness that doesn't scream. It whispers. It tells you to stay where it's safe, where it's familiar, where nothing challenges you. It convinces you that comfort equals security, and that venturing into the unknown is dangerous, unnecessary, even foolish. But here's the irony. The real foolishness lies not in taking risks, but in refusing to grow. Fear of change is not just a hesitation, it is a quiet surrender. It is the decision to freeze in place while the rest of the world moves forward. And over time that fear doesn't protect you. It imprisons you. Let me tell you about a man named Michael. Michael had lived in the same neighborhood for over 40 years. He knew every street, every face, every rhythm of the place. His children had grown, moved on, started families of their own, and they encouraged him to do the same. "Come live closer to us, Dad. There's more opportunity, better care, a fresh start." But Michael resisted. "Why would I leave? I know everything here. I'm comfortable, I'm fine." And yet the world around him was already changing. The shops he once visited shut their doors. Friends moved away. The community grew unfamiliar, but Michael stayed, clinging not to what was, but to the memory of what used to be. Eventually, out of necessity, he agreed to move closer to his children, and what he discovered shocked him. New friendships, new routine, a renewed sense of purpose, opportunities he never would have found had he stayed frozen in the past. And that's the truth about change. It doesn't wait for your permission. Life flows like a river, always moving, always reshaping the land. But the foolish man stands on the shore, trying to hold the water back with his hands, while the wise man, he steps into the current and lets it carry him to something greater. The Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Observe constantly that all things take place by change, and accustom yourself to consider that the nature of the universe loves nothing so much as to change. You see, fear of change is rooted in a lie. The lie that what you know is all there is. But wisdom begins when you realize that growth only lives outside of comfort. The cocoon feels safe, but you were never meant to stay there. You were meant to break free, to stretch, to evolve. Ask yourself honestly, am I staying here because it's right or because it's familiar? What am I afraid to lose? And what might I never gain because of that fear? Because when you cling to the old out of fear, you lose the chance to become someone new. When you avoid change, you don't just resist the world, you resist your own potential. Yes, change is uncomfortable, but so is regret. So is wondering what could have been, if only you had been brave enough to step forward. So next time life invites you to change, to move, to adapt, to grow, don't turn away. Say yes. Even if your hands tremble, even if your voice shakes, walk toward it. Because in that unknown space lies something no comfort zone can ever give you, your transformation. So now that we've walked through these 6 signs, the closed mind, the constant blaming, the arrogance, the lack of empathy, the fear of change, and the refusal to listen, you might be wondering, what if I've seen these traits in myself? Here's the honest truth. We all have. At some point in life, we've all clung to our ego, blamed others, resisted growth, or spoken when we should have listened. That doesn't make you stupid. That makes you human. But what separates the foolish from the wise is not perfection. It's the willingness to reflect, to grow, to change. The Stoics never demanded flawlessness. They taught us that wisdom is a journey, not a destination. It's built moment by moment through self-awareness, humility, and courage. So if you recognized one or more of these signs in yourself, good. That means you're paying attention. That means you're ready to do better. Because stupidity is not a permanent condition. It's just a moment when we forget to question ourselves. But wisdom begins the second we say, I can do better than this. So keep growing, keep reflecting, keep walking the path. And if this video sparked something in you, if it helped you see yourself or others more clearly, like, share and subscribe, so we can continue exploring these powerful lessons together. Thank you for watching, and remember, the wise listen, the foolish interrupt. The wise grow, the foolish defend. Choose wisely.